Hey, you, yes, you. Welcome to Francis Wisdom, the place where we dive deep into the heart of Pope Francis's teachings to find light, hope, and purpose. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because today we're about to embark on a journey that will touch your soul and maybe even bring a tear to your eye. Imagine this: Pope Francis, the leader of 1.3 billion Catholics, steps off a plane onto a tiny island in the Mediterranean, surrounded by refugees, men, women, and children who've lost their homes, their families, their everything. Their eyes are heavy with pain, their stories etched with sorrow. Yet in that single moment, something extraordinary unfolds. A heartwarming encounter filled with love, compassion, and a glimpse of God's presence shocks the world and reminds us what it truly means to see the face of Christ in every person. I'll be honest, I thought I knew what compassion was. I'd give $1 here, a kind word there, and call it a day. But when I learned about this moment and tried to live it myself, I was humbled. I failed at first, stumbled through my attempts, but what I discovered changed how I see the world and my place in it. Want to know what happened on that island and how it can transform your life? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll not only be moved by Pope Francis's encounter with refugees, but inspired to bring his love and compassion into your own corner of the world. Let's start with a question that might hit close to home. Have you ever walked past someone in need? A homeless person on the street, a struggling coworker, a neighbor going through a tough time, and felt a tug in your heart, but kept walking? I have, and it's a moment that still haunts me. A few years ago, I was rushing through my city, late for a meeting, coffee spilling from my cup, my mind racing with deadlines. I passed a man sitting on the sidewalk, his cardboard sign reading, "Lost my job, please help." His face was weathered, his eyes downcast, and I kept going. I told myself I was too busy, that someone else would help, that he might not even need it. But as I walked away, a knot formed in my stomach. Why didn't I stop? Why didn't I at least look him in the eye, offer a smile, or share a kind word? That guilt lingered, and it came flooding back when I learned about Pope Francis's heartwarming encounter with refugees on the island of Lampedusa in 2013, his very first trip as Pope outside Rome. It wasn't just a visit. It was a moment that shook the world, showing us what compassion looks like when it's lived with courage and love. Let's set the scene. Lampedusa, a tiny speck in the Mediterranean Sea, was ground zero for one of the greatest humanitarian crises of our time. Thousands of refugees from Africa and the Middle East, fleeing war, poverty, and persecution, risked their lives crossing the sea in overcrowded boats. Many never made it. Hundreds drowned when boats capsized, their dreams of safety swallowed by the waves. The world knew about the crisis. News reports flashed statistics. Politicians debated policies. But it was Pope Francis who made us feel the weight of those lives. On July 8, 2013, just 4 months after becoming Pope, he arrived on Lampedusa, not with the grandeur of a world leader, but with the humility of a pastor. He didn't come with solutions or speeches. He came to listen, to mourn, to love. He met refugees face to face, people like Amina, a young mother from Somalia who'd lost her husband to violence, or Khalid, a teenager from Eritrea who'd watched his family drown in a shipwreck. Pope Francis held their hands, looked into their eyes, and wept with them. In his homily at a makeshift altar, surrounded by fishing boats and survivors, he said, "These brothers and sisters of ours were trying to escape difficult situations to find some serenity and peace. Who is responsible for this blood?" Those words weren't just a question, they were a cry from the heart, a call to every one of us to stop, to see, to act. I remember reading that homily and feeling my chest tighten. Could I have looked into Amina's eyes, heard her story of loss, and not turned away? Could I have held Khalid's hand, knowing he'd seen horrors I can't imagine, and offered him hope? Honestly, I wasn't sure. I wanted to be compassionate, but my life was busy, my problems pressing, and it was easier to scroll past the news than to engage. That's when I decided to try living Pope Francis's example, to see if I could bring even a fraction of his love into my world. I started small, signing up to volunteer at a local shelter for immigrants and homeless families. My first day was overwhelming. The shelter was crowded, the air thick with tension. People were guarded, their stories heavy with struggle. I met a man named John, who'd fled violence in his home country and was now sleeping on a cot in a strange city. I wanted to help, but I froze. What could I say? What could I do? I fumbled through small talk, feeling useless, like I was intruding on his pain. Then I remembered something from Pope Francis's Lampedusa visit. He didn't try to fix everything. He listened. He was present. So I took a deep breath, sat down with John, and asked, "Can you tell me about your life?" He hesitated, then started talking about his kids back home, his dream of being a mechanic, the fear that kept him awake at night. I didn't have answers, but I listened. By the end, he gave me a small, weary smile and said, "Thank you for seeing me." That moment changed me. It wasn't about solving John's problems. It was about seeing his humanity, saying through my actions, "You are not alone." I left the shelter that day with tears in my eyes, not because I'd done something heroic, but because I'd glimpsed what Pope Francis showed the world on Lampedusa. Compassion is a choice, a commitment to love, even when it's hard. That encounter in Lampedusa wasn't just a moment, it sparked a movement. Pope Francis's call to welcome refugees inspired countless initiatives across the globe. Parishes opened their doors to migrants, families sponsored refugee resettlement, and organizations like Caritas Internationalis expanded their aid programs. Vatican News reported that donations poured in after his visit, and some European countries even adjusted asylum policies in response to the global attention. But what moved me most was how Pope Francis lived out Jesus' words in Matthew 25:35, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." That's the heart of his encounter, a reminder that every person, no matter their story, is our brother or sister, created in God's image. Let's ground this in Scripture, because Pope Francis's actions are deeply rooted in the Bible. Jesus' entire ministry was about welcoming the outcast, lepers, tax collectors, sinners. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10:25-37, a man helps a stranger, crossing cultural and religious divides, showing that love knows no boundaries. Pope Francis embodies this, not just in Lampedusa, but in countless moments, like when he washed the feet of refugees during Holy Thursday in 2016, including Muslims and Hindus, shocking the world with his inclusivity. He's teaching us that compassion isn't a feeling, it's an action, a way of living that reflects God's love, and it's not always easy. I learned that at the shelter. Some days, I was tired, frustrated, or scared of saying the wrong thing. There were moments when people rejected my help, and I felt discouraged. But every time I showed up, listened, and tried again, I felt God's presence, nudging me to keep going, to keep loving. Historically, the Church has always been a refuge for the marginalized. In the early centuries, Christians cared for widows and orphans, earning respect in a harsh Roman world. St. Francis of Assisi embraced lepers, kissing their wounds to show God's love. St. Teresa of Calcutta served the dying in India's slums, seeing Jesus in every face. Pope Francis carries this torch, and his 2020 encyclical Fratelli Tutti calls us to build a world where no one is a stranger, where we're all brothers and sisters. That's what makes his Lampedusa encounter so heartwarming. It's not just a story, it's a challenge to live differently, to open our hearts to those society overlooks. So, how can you live this compassion in your own life? Let's get practical, because Pope Francis doesn't just inspire, he shows us how to act. Start small. Next time you see someone in need, don't look away. Offer a smile, a kind word, or a moment of your time. If you're at the grocery store and see a tired cashier, ask how their day's going. If a coworker's struggling, listen without judging. These tiny acts ripple outward, creating a wave of love. Pope Francis says, "Love is shown more in deeds than in words." Another step, get involved locally. Volunteer at a shelter, food bank, or refugee center even once a month. It doesn't have to be big. Bring a meal, sort donations, or just sit with someone like I did with John. If time's tight, donate to organizations like Caritas or Jesuit Refugee Service, which support refugees worldwide. And don't underestimate the power of prayer. Pray for those in need, like Amina and Khalid, asking God to guide them and to open your heart to help. Let me share another story from the shelter, because it shows how small acts can make a difference. A few weeks after meeting John, I met a woman named Sophia, a single mom who'd fled domestic violence. She was quiet, barely made eye contact. I didn't push, just helped serve meals and smiled when I passed her. One day she approached me, holding a drawing her son had made, a colorful house with a big sun. She said, "He drew this because you were kind to us." That drawing, that moment, reminded me of Pope Francis on Lampedusa, where his kindness gave refugees hope. It wasn't about fixing their lives. It was about showing them they were seen, valued, loved. This compassion isn't always easy. I've had days at the shelter when I felt overwhelmed, like my efforts were a drop in the bucket. I've questioned whether I'm doing enough, whether I'm doing it right, but Pope Francis's example keeps me going. In Fratelli Tutti, he writes, "Every act of kindness, however small, builds a culture of encounter. That's the key. Every step counts. Every smile, every moment of presence, every prayer, it all matters. And it's not just about helping others, it's about transforming ourselves." When I started volunteering, I was stressed, distracted, focused on my own problems. But listening to John, Sophia, and others shifted something in me. I became more patient, more grateful, more aware of God's presence in my life. That's the beauty of compassion. It changes the giver as much as the receiver. Let's talk about the global impact of Pope Francis's Lampedusa visit, because it's not just a story. It's a movement that's still alive. After his trip, the world paid attention. Media outlets like the New York Times and BBC ran headlines. Pope Francis calls for action on refugee crisis. Donations to refugee aid organizations spiked, with Caritas reporting a 20% increase in contributions that year. Some European leaders, moved by his words, pushed for more humane asylum policies, though challenges remain. But the real impact was in the hearts of ordinary people. Parishes across Italy, Spain, and beyond began hosting refugees, offering food, shelter, and language classes. In my own city, a church I know started a program to help immigrant families with job training, inspired by Pope Francis's call. These efforts show that one moment, one act of love, can spark a chain reaction, touching lives far beyond Lampedusa. You might be wondering, why refugees? Why this crisis? For Pope Francis, it's personal. Growing up in Argentina, he saw poverty and displacement firsthand. His parents were Italian immigrants, so he knows the struggle of starting over in a new land. As a Jesuit, he worked in Buenos Aires' slums, serving the poor and marginalized. That experience shaped his papacy, making him a pope who goes to the peripheries, as he calls it. places and people society ignores. His Lampedusa visit was just the beginning. He's since met refugees in Jordan, Greece, and Iraq, each time calling us to see them as brothers and sisters. In 2019, he unveiled a sculpture in St. Peter's Square, Angels Unawares, depicting refugees on a boat, a reminder that God is with the displaced. Scripture reinforces this call. In Leviticus 19:34, God commands, "The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native-born. Love them as yourself." Jesus echoes this in Matthew 25:40. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Pope Francis lives these verses, showing us that caring for refugees isn't just charity, it's worship, a way of meeting Jesus in the faces of those who suffer. And it's not just about refugees. This call to compassion applies to anyone in need, your neighbor, your colleague, the stranger on the street. Every person is an opportunity to love as Jesus loves. Historically, the Church has been a beacon for the vulnerable. In the 4th century, St. Basil the Great built hospitals for the poor, funded by his own wealth. During the Middle Ages, monasteries sheltered travelers and refugees. In the 20th century, St. Maximilian Kolbe gave his life for a stranger in Auschwitz. Pope Francis continues this legacy, but he's not asking us to be saints overnight. He's asking us to start where we are, with what we have. In his 2013 Lampedusa homily, he said, "We are a society that has forgotten how to weep, how to experience compassion." That line stuck with me. Have I forgotten how to weep? Have I grown numb to others' pain? Trying to live his example, volunteering, listening, praying, has been my way of learning to weep again, to feel again, to love again. Let's get practical again, because inspiration is great, but action is where change happens. Here are a few more ways to live Pope Francis's compassion wherever you are. First, educate yourself. Learn about the refugee crisis or local issues in your community. Websites like unhcr.org or caritas.org have resources to understand the challenges and how you can help. Second, advocate. Speak up for those who can't. Write to your local leaders, share stories on social media, or join a community group working for justice. Third, pray intentionally. Pope Francis often prays for refugees, and he shared a simple prayer. Lord, protect your children who seek safety, and open our hearts to welcome them. Try praying it daily, naming specific people or groups, like Amina, Khalid, or the families in your city. Fourth, build connections. Reach out to someone different from you, maybe an immigrant neighbor or a coworker from another culture. Invite them for coffee. Ask about their life. These small bridges create a world of encounter, as Pope Francis calls it. I want to share one more story because it shows how compassion can surprise you. A few months into volunteering, I met a teenage girl at the shelter, Layla, who'd come from Afghanistan with her mom. She was shy, always drawing in a notebook. One day, I noticed her sketching a bird, and I complimented it. She lit up, showing me page after page of drawings, birds, trees, her old home. We started talking about art, and I learned she wanted to be an artist but felt it was impossible in a new country. I connected her with a local art program, and last month, she sent me a photo of her first painting in a community exhibit. It was a bird soaring over a bright sky, and she wrote, "Thank you for believing in me." That moment wasn't about me. It was about God working through a simple act of noticing, of caring. It's what Pope Francis did on Lampedusa, and it's what we're all called to do. This call to compassion isn't without challenges. There are days when I feel inadequate, like my efforts don't matter. There are moments when fear creeps in. Fear of saying the wrong thing, of being rejected, of not having enough to give. But Pope Francis's example keeps me grounded. In Fratelli Tutti, he writes, "No one is useless, and no one is expendable. That includes you and me." We don't have to solve the world's problems. We just have to start, to take one step, to love one person at a time. And when we do, we're not alone. God is with us, guiding us, giving us strength. The global movement sparked by Lampedusa is still growing. In 2016, Pope Francis launched the Share the Journey campaign with Caritas, encouraging Catholics to meet migrants and share their stories. Thousands of communities joined, from Canada to Kenya, hosting dinners, prayer vigils, and advocacy events. In my own parish, we started a monthly welcome night for new immigrants, inspired by this campaign. It's not perfect. Attendance varies, logistics are tricky, but every time someone walks through the door, smiles, and feels at home, it's worth it. That's the legacy of Lampedusa, a world where no one is a stranger, where every encounter is a chance to love. You might be thinking, this sounds inspiring, but where do I start? I'm not Pope Francis. I get it. I felt the same way. But here's what I've learned. Compassion starts where you are. You don't need a title or a platform. You just need a heart willing to see, to listen, to act. Maybe it's helping a neighbor with groceries, volunteering an hour a week, or praying for someone in need. Maybe it's learning about an issue, like homelessness or refugees, and sharing what you learn with friends. Every step counts, and every step brings you closer to God. Let's talk about prayer again, because it's the foundation of this work. Pope Francis often says, "Prayer opens the heart to love." When I started volunteering, I began praying the prayer for migrants, which he shared in 2018. "Lord, make us bearers of hope, so that where there is darkness, your light may shine." I pray it every morning, asking God to show me who needs my love that day. It's changed how I move through the world. I notice people more. I'm less rushed, more present. Try it yourself. Pray for refugees, for the homeless, for anyone in need, and ask God to guide your actions. It's a small step, but it's powerful. I want to circle back to Lampedusa because that moment is more than a story. It's a mirror. It shows us who we are and who we can be. When Pope Francis stood with those refugees, he wasn't just speaking to them. He was speaking to us, to you and me. He was saying, don't look away. Don't let fear or busyness stop you. Love, even when it's hard. That's what moved me to tears when I first read about it, and it's what keeps me going when compassion feels overwhelming. I've made mistakes, times I've been impatient, times I've walked past someone in need. But I keep trying, because Pope Francis shows us that love is a journey, not a destination. Here's a challenge for you. This week, do one act of compassion. It could be big, like volunteering, or small, like smiling at a stranger. Notice someone who's overlooked, listen to their story, and show them they matter. Then come back and share your experience in the comments. I want to hear how it went. And if this video touched you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to Francis's Wisdom for more stories that inspire. We're building a community of love, one heart at a time. Let's talk about the bigger picture because Pope Francis's encounter is part of a larger mission. In Fratelli Tutti, he calls for a culture of encounter where we meet others with openness, not judgment. This isn't just about refugees, it's about everyone. Think about your life. Who's the stranger you encounter every day? Maybe it's a coworker you don't get along with, a family member you've drifted from, or a neighbor you've never met. Pope Francis challenges us to reach out, to build bridges, to create moments of connection. It's not always comfortable. I've had awkward conversations, moments of rejection, But every time I try, I grow. I become more patient, more understanding, more like the person God calls me to be. Another story from the shelter, because these moments keep teaching me. Last month, I met a young man named Ahmed who'd come from Sudan. He was angry, distrustful, and I couldn't blame him. His journey was brutal. I tried talking to him, but he brushed me off. I felt discouraged, but I kept showing up, offering small gestures, a nod, a cup of coffee. One day, he sat down and started talking. He told me about his sister, still in Sudan, and his fear for her safety. I didn't have solutions, but I listened, and I prayed for his sister that night. A week later, Ahmed thanked me, saying, "You didn't give up on me." That's what Pope Francis did on Lampedusa. He didn't give up on Amina, Khalid, or any of the refugees. He showed up, and he loved. This call to compassion is urgent because our world needs it. Division, hatred, and indifference are everywhere. On the news, in our communities, even in our hearts. Pope Francis's Lampedusa visit reminds us that we have a choice. We can look away, or we can look with love. In 2013, he chose love, and the world noticed. Media outlets called it a turning point in the refugee crisis, and ordinary people, Catholics, non-Catholics, even atheists, were moved to act. In my city, a group of college students started a fundraiser for refugee families after watching a documentary about Lampedusa. That's the power of one moment, one heart, one choice to love. Let's talk about failure, because compassion isn't always a straight path. There are days when I've been too tired to volunteer, too distracted to listen, too quick to judge. I remember one time at the shelter, I snapped at a colleague over a scheduling mix-up. I felt awful afterward, realizing I'd let stress get the better of me. But Pope Francis's example reminds me to keep going. In his 2015 homily, he said, "Compassion is not a burden, it's a gift." Even our failures are chances to grow, to ask forgiveness, to try again. So, if you try this challenge and stumble, don't give up. God sees your heart, and every effort matters. Prayer is key here too. Pope Francis often prays for refugees, and he shared another prayer I love. Lord, teach us to see with your eyes, to love with your heart. I pray it when I'm feeling overwhelmed, asking God to help me see others as he does. It's changed how I interact with people. I'm less judgmental, more curious, more open. Try it this week. Pray for someone in need, whether it's a refugee, a homeless person, or a friend. Ask God to show you how to love them. It's a small step, but it's a start. The Lampedusa encounter is a call to action, but it's also a call to hope. Pope Francis didn't just mourn with the refugees. He gave them hope. He told them, "You are not forgotten." That message reached millions, sparking a movement that's still alive. In 2020, he launched the Mediterranean Sea Without Borders initiative, encouraging dialogue between communities to support migrants. In my parish, we've joined this by hosting cultural nights where immigrants share their food, music, and stories. It's messy, imperfect, but it's beautiful. People laughing, connecting, becoming family. That's what Pope Francis envisioned, a world where no one is a stranger. You might be thinking, this is inspiring, but I'm not sure I can do it. I felt that way too. Compassion can feel daunting, especially when the world's problems seem so big. But Pope Francis doesn't ask us to solve everything. In Fratelli Tutti, he writes, "A single individual is enough to bring hope to a world in need." That's you. Your smile, your kindness, your prayer. It's enough to start. When I started volunteering, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't, some days. But every time I show up, I learn, I grow, and I see God at work. You can do this too. Start where you are, with one act, one person, one moment. Here's another challenge, because I want you to feel the power of this. This week, find one person who needs compassion. It could be a family member, a stranger, or someone at work. Do something for them. Listen, help, pray. Then share your story in the comments. I'll be reading them, and I can't wait to hear how you're living Pope Francis's call. And if this video moved you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Francis's wisdom. We're building a community of love, one story at a time. Let's keep going, because this encounter is bigger than Lampedusa. It's about our world, our hearts, our faith. Pope Francis's visit wasn't just about refugees, it was about humanity. He showed us that every person, no matter their story, is precious to God. In 2013, he stood with Amina, Khalid, and countless others, and he's still standing with them. In Greece, in Iraq, in every place where people suffer, his message is clear. We're called to stand with them too. Not out of guilt, but out of love. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. I want to share one final story because it sums up what this encounter means to me. Last week, I was at the shelter, helping with a kids' art program. A boy named Daniel, maybe 10 years old, was drawing a boat on a stormy sea. I asked him about it, and he said, "This is my family's boat." We almost didn't make it. His voice was quiet, but his eyes were bright. I sat with him, listening as he described his journey from Central America, the fear, the hope. Then he pointed to the sky in his drawing, where he'd added a sun. "This is God," he said. "He was with us." That moment broke me open. Daniel, like the refugees on Lampedusa, carried a faith that shamed my doubts. He reminded me of Pope Francis's words, "The poor teach us how to hope." This video is about hope. Hope that we can love better, live better, be better. Pope Francis's encounter with refugees isn't just a story to admire, it's a call to action. It's a call to see the Aminas, Khalids, Johns, Sophias, and Daniels in our world, and to love them as God does. It's a call to weep with those who weep, to stand with those who suffer, to build a world where no one is forgotten. I'm still learning how to do this, and I'm guessing you are too. But we're not alone. God is with us. Pope Francis is showing us the way, and together we can make a difference. So, let's do this. Let's live compassion, one moment at a time. Let's pray for those in need, act with kindness, and share this message. Drop a comment with your story or your thoughts. I'm here, reading and cheering you on. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Francis Wisdom for more stories that move and inspire. Let's make the world a little more heartwarming together. God bless you and keep loving.